It started like any ordinary day in the neighborhood. The lawns were trimmed, the driveways spotless, and the HOA board members seemed to watch everything with hawk-like eyes. Among them was Karen, the self-appointed enforcer of the rules. Yet she wasn't the president of the HOA, nor did she hold any real authority beyond her spot on the board, but she acted as if she ran the entire community. For weeks, she had been eyeing my front yard. It wasn't messy or neglected. In fact, it was well kept. I had planted roses along the walkway, a few sunflowers in the corner, and a patch of herbs near the porch. Neighbors often complimented it, saying it gave the block a fresh, lively look. But to Karen, it was an abomination. She claimed the garden violated Uniform Appearance Guidelines, a vague set of HOA rules she interpreted however she pleased. One morning, I opened my mailbox to find a bright yellow envelope stamped with the HOA's seal. Inside was a violation notice, complete with photographs of my garden and a demand: pay a $500 fine or face escalating penalties. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Surely no one could be fined for having a few flowers in their yard. But as I read the notice again, it became clear. This wasn't an error. It was Karen. The fine wasn't just a piece of paper. It was an insult. It told me my effort to beautify my home was unwelcome, and that I was expected to conform to a bland, cookie-cutter version of suburban living. It wasn't about the flowers. It was about control. For a few days, I wrestled with what to do. Paying the fine felt wrong. Removing the garden felt even worse. Yet ignoring it could mean bigger penalties, maybe even legal threats. Friends and neighbors advised me to let it go, to stay out of Karen's crosshairs. After all, she had caused trouble for others before. She once fined a family for leaving their garbage cans out too long, and another for painting their shutters the wrong shade of beige. People hated her, but few had ever fought back. I spent nights staring at my yard, wondering why something so small had turned into such a problem. And then it hit me. If Karen wanted to make a scene out of my little garden, I would give her something far bigger to complain about. The fine had planted a seed, not of resentment, but of defiance. I decided that instead of removing my garden, I would expand it. Not just with more flowers, but with vines, shrubs, and trees. I would transform my yard into something no one could ignore. A wild, living jungle right in the middle of suburbia. And as I started planning, I realized something else. This wasn't just about Karen anymore. It was about showing everyone in the neighborhood that they didn't have to bow down to arbitrary rules and petty tyrants. The $500 fine wasn't the end of my garden. It was the beginning of my rebellion. The decision was made. I wasn't just going to keep my garden. I was going to turn it into something unforgettable. The $500 fine would serve as the spark, and my yard would become the flame that burned Karen's false authority to the ground. The first step was research. I spent hours looking up plants that could thrive in my climate. I wanted greenery that grew fast, flowers that bloomed bright, and shrubs that spread wide. If Karen thought a few roses and sunflowers were too much, she hadn't seen anything yet. I began small, planting climbing vines along the fence and porch. Within weeks, tendrils curled upward, weaving into a thick green curtain. Next came the shrubs. I chose varieties that branched out quickly, filling empty spaces with dense foliage. Then I added exotic plants, banana trees, tall grasses, and bursts of tropical flowers that looked wildly out of place in a suburban setting. Neighbors passing by slowed their cars just to stare. By midsummer, my front yard was unrecognizable. The once neat flower patch had transformed into a miniature rainforest. Birds nested in the branches. Butterflies danced over blossoms, and the air carried a sweet, earthy scent. Children loved walking past, their eyes wide with wonder. Many neighbors began stopping me in the driveway to say how beautiful it looked. They told me it felt like an escape from the rigid monotony of our cookie-cutter street. But not everyone was thrilled. Karen seethed. At first, she sent more violation notices, each one angrier than the last. She accused me of creating a visual disturbance and lowering property values. When that didn't work, she went door to door, trying to rally support against me. She claimed my jungle was attracting pests, hiding snakes, and even creating a fire hazard. Most people ignored her. Some laughed in her face. The more she pushed, the more isolated she became. For years, she had ruled the neighborhood through intimidation, convincing people that going against her meant trouble. But now, she looked powerless. My yard had become a symbol of resistance. Neighbors whispered about it at HOA meetings, some even hinting they might expand their own landscaping. Still, Karen wasn't one to back down quietly. She filed formal complaints with the HOA board, demanding they force me to remove the plants. When the board hesitated, knowing how unpopular she was becoming, she threatened legal action. She started showing up at my property with a camera, snapping pictures and muttering under her breath. One afternoon, I caught her standing at the edge of my driveway, furiously scribbling notes like she was building a case for court. The tension in the neighborhood grew thicker with each passing week. On one side was Karen, clinging desperately to control. On the other side was me, and, increasingly, the neighbors who saw in my jungle a chance to stand up to her. But the breaking point hadn't come yet. Karen was just getting started, and her next move would bring the conflict to a boiling point, turning a neighborhood dispute into an all-out war. By the end of summer, the neighborhood was divided into two groups, those who admired the jungle and those who feared Karen's wrath. But the tide was turning fast. For every complaint she made, 3 more neighbors complimented the garden. What started as one man's defiance had become the neighborhood's quiet rebellion. Karen, however, couldn't let it go. She escalated her fight with new levels of desperation. She brought city inspectors to my property, pointing at every leaf and vine like it was evidence of a crime. But the inspectors found nothing out of order. My plants were healthy, the yard was well kept, and everything met city codes. To Karen's frustration, they left without issuing a single warning. When that failed, she tried a smear campaign. She spread rumors that my garden harbored rats, that it was driving down home values, that buyers were avoiding the neighborhood because of me. But the truth was obvious. Houses around me sold for higher prices, with listings even bragging about being steps away from a lush tropical garden. Her lies fell flat. Then came her boldest move yet. At the next HOA meeting, she proposed a new rule that would ban non-uniform landscaping. It was a direct attack on me, a way to rewrite the rules to erase my jungle. She stood at the podium, red-faced, waving photos of my yard like they were evidence of a crime. But when the vote was called, the result shocked her. Nearly every neighbor voted against her. The motion failed miserably, and her own allies on the board stayed silent. The humiliation broke something in her. For years, she had controlled the neighborhood through fear, but now she had lost that grip. People began whispering about replacing her on the board. Some even started openly mocking her obsession. The more she fought, the smaller she looked. Meanwhile, my jungle thrived. By fall, it had grown into a true sanctuary. I added a small pond, winding stone pathways, and lights that made the plants glow softly at night. Families walked past just to see it. Neighbors brought their kids over to look at the butterflies. The same yard that Karen called a visual disturbance had become the heart of the community. Eventually, Karen resigned from the board. She claimed it was because of personal reasons, but everyone knew the truth. She had been beaten, not by force, but by resilience. She had tried to bury me with a fine, but instead I had planted something stronger than rules, something living, vibrant, and undeniable. The $500 fine never broke me. It only inspired me, and in the end, my jungle wasn't just a victory over Karen. It was a victory for every neighbor tired of being told what they could and couldn't do with their own homes. Karen may have started the war, but the jungle ended it.